Now, it feels like everyone at the moment is talking about Viktor Gyokeres at Arsenal, and despite only scoring 3 goals in 10 games, Arteta has praised him numerous times in press conferences, and the team have been playing better and better with him in the side. Now, in this video, we're going to look at exactly what he's been doing well and what he needs to improve on, and why you might be wrong about Viktor Gyokeres' his overall time at Arsenal so far. So let's get into it. Now, I've been prompted to do this video because I've seen a lot of talk, especially on Twitter, about how good Viktor Gyokeres has been at Arsenal so far. I know, and many of you will know, that the goal scoring hasn't been good enough. He's only scored goals against Leeds and Nottingham Forest, and although the argument very much centered around Arsenal not playing to his strengths over the last couple of months, I do think in the last 4 to 5 games that hasn't really been the case, which has prompted this new argument about his work within the team. Now, I do want to say I think that was a fair judgment at the time. I said a couple of weeks ago on a podcast that I actually think his 0 shots against United, against Man City and against Liverpool was inexcusable from the team and not good enough, but since then he has had a lot more shots, and especially with someone like Eze in the team and the amount of shots that both of them have been having, an overall positive for the club and something we expected when they both joined. They were high volume shot players anyway. Now, looking at the tactics board, the first real indication that Gyokeres has been very good for Arsenal and he's doing a lot of work that you might not see is the fact of his presence in the central areas. Now, Viktor Gyokeres is always in the middle in this situation and he's always being tight to 2 players. Something I have quite liked about Gyokeres, and you'll see in all the clips that he has, is that he doesn't really care if he has to run left, if he has to run right, and is always an option on both sides. I think he does prefer the left overall, but that's not necessarily guaranteed. He will play on the right as much as he needs to help the team. Now, the thing that this has been causing is very much like the Erling Haaland situation. Erling Haaland is so good at just being in these areas and having 2 players on him, and they have to be tight to him as well, because most of the time centre-back partnerships aren't elite and they don't really know each other like that. They don't know when they've got to step up on the player, and they're not like Gabriel and Saliba. That embedded partnership isn't always there with majority of teams you're going to play against, which means they kind of want to stay tight to each other to have the sort of free realm of defending it. Now, this has not been a secret at all, and this has numerous times opened gaps in other situations. I think someone like Timber has benefited a lot. You see him in these sort of deeper areas, can be able to go on these sort of mazy runs when some gaps open up in midfield and he manages to get there. But there's also times off the ball he will just sit inside, which has been a big part of giving him space and giving space to other players, where we've always got that little bit overall. Now, something I actually really like about Gyokeres' play in this team, it necessarily hasn't worked brilliant, but I think it's quite clear that it's happening, is that Gyokeres is this player that can have the ball quick into him in these areas back to goal, which is something he isn't the best at, and there has been some teething issues with that, but I think he is getting better at it every week. And I think if you get some good connections with a bounce pass, we've been seeing Arsenal do these bounce passes backwards all over the pitch to open up spaces in other areas, then with these sort of movements you can have it a little pass back into Eze, and Eze could put this ball through. And Gyokeres is a little bit more of an impact player. All the time when he picks up the ball in these situations, it sometimes does bounce off him and he loses it, but he has been getting better at them overall. Now, looking at the stats, Gyokeres has made a huge amount of sprints in the Premier League, and this has moved a lot of the backlines deeper a lot quicker. Now, I think Arsenal before Gyokeres and some of the other players that have come in, this wouldn't necessarily have always benefited. You know, we had Odegaard in this sort of 8 deeper role, and he's obviously still better there, but we've got Eze coming in a lot more with the injuries, and he's been able to benefit from that space that Gyokeres creates by just pushing that back line with them sprints all the time. And also another big part of this, Saka and Trossard, or whoever wingers that we play, have been playing a lot more inside. This has really helped with Martinelli off the bench, with him being able to run centrally. We've seen Trossard kind of act as a 2 up front recently with Gyokeres, and not only does this pin the 2 centre-backs, this is pinning people like the full-backs inside and giving space to someone else. This is letting Arsenal break the handbrake off and get into these areas with more attacking players. It's more about the intent necessarily than just Gyokeres. There's a lot more players in these areas, but it's still him, I think, which is helping that happen. Now, if you look at the heat maps as well between Gyokeres and Havertz, I think Havertz is from last season, this is Gyokeres from this season, you can see that Havertz obviously had a lot more touches by just how the sheer strength of the heat map, and probably had way more involvement on the ball. Now, we know Havertz likes coming to this right hand side and being very helpful in these triangles, and this was a very good idea of getting people like Saka in behind into them key areas to create chances, but it wouldn't be in necessarily loads of space. It would just kind of pull a player away in certain occasions to help. But obviously the key is that the box box presence just was not there. Now, I think Arsenal have always needed a more box presence, more bigger striker just to help hold up the ball and work with players, and that is clearly quite key with Gyokeres. The reason why Havertz comes this deep and is able to put these balls through is because our wingers are our main goal scorers, and they still are in many ways. You know, a lot of people have spoken about it, but Arsenal's wingers have the intent to score a lot of the time rather than set it up, and they're trying to adapt to it and learn a little bit more to that. And Arsenal haven't had a natural striker up front, so Havertz doing these roles made sense, especially in these sort of teams that want to sit deeper. And the big reason why Havertz does this anyway is to help ball progression first of all, because Arsenal are not always the most reliable at it. When you don't have someone like Odegaard in the team, you really lose one of your two-way players like Havertz, who can do that sort of sprint into the box and all that work there, but is more importantly very good at everything rather than just being specifically good at one thing. And we've seen some struggles with Arsenal when Odegaard's not in the team to have that sort of ball progression happen, but there's obviously been a lot of reasons why that's not been that much of a worry. And one of them is Zubimendi. Watch my video yesterday if you want me to talk more in detail about Zubimendi's exact role and his ball progression, but Zubimendi's passing is so much more experimental, so much more aggressive. He loves putting the ball inside. We're now starting to see Rice take a lot more risks on the ball as well, and I do think it really just helps having that mentality of someone next to you who's going to do them as well. And Eze is obviously a guy that will take loads of risks. Eze will go into areas, he floats around the pitch a lot more, he's picking the ball up in situations to shoot a lot, he's having a lot of shots per game. And when you combine the fact you have Eze in the team and Gyokeres, they can't mark all these players at the same time, which is making it a lot more threatening to play against Arsenal, because they just have so many more people that are willing to shoot, are good shooters of the ball, and will get in good areas. And I think the combination of all this has made Arsenal's ball progression broadly quite fine overall. This means within this current setup and how the team works, it makes way more sense to play someone like Gyokeres because he is pushing that line and getting into the box. And I want to show this report by Football Econ on Twitter. Go and check it out. And it kind of shows what Viktor Gyokeres has done so far at Arsenal. You see that his box presence is one of the most in the league, most in Europe. He is really up there. And although his finishing is actually down, which is something you probably wouldn't expected from him, his link-up play is much more up. His movement is good. And he is having that little bit of a creative spark. And we really are starting to see that. And that's the thing with Gyokeres. We brought him in and I just did not know if he was going to be a reliable person back to goal. But we are seeing improvements of his whole up play every single game. He is coming down to this left-hand side and this right-hand side, very much like Kai Havertz did, holding the ball up and playing the ball inside. There's many chances we create from this, and he gets into the box, but at that moment, the team don't look for him because the space has been created for other players to have shots in good areas. So it's not always about getting Gyokeres that shot at the end of all. And I think this is one thing you have to consider with Gyokeres at Arsenal so far. Despite him being the main guy you want to have shots and the main guy you want to be in the area, a lot of Arsenal's sort of ideation this season has just been shooting more and getting into better areas. Something Arsenal do, which we have done for years, is faff a little bit around when we get into that final third. And now we're getting to that moment where there is a little bit of faff still. I will say in certain games there's a bit of delaying on shots, but now we have players that want to shoot more early and get into these areas, which means they're not always going to look for Gyokeres. It's kind of Gyokeres' job to find loose balls, and if the ball bounces him, to get there, and he's not always going to have the most involvement in the game, which is a big difference to his time at Sporting, where every single cross, every single ability is trying to find him in the box. And although I think in certain aspects, I think Gyokeres' running hasn't helped. I think he doesn't want to consistently, although he's done a lot of running, I'm not sure always it's the best idea. I think from crosses, he is still not that used to people having the ball down the wing, so he doesn't know when to go early or late, and I think he can kind of get swallowed up sometimes with two players being on him. And there also is problems with the fact we still cross it high into him, and he just isn't that good in the air, and it's something that we really need to try and stop doing. We need to put the ball on the floor more, which admittedly Trossard out of anyone is probably the one that does it the most. But all of that is not really relevant when he is bringing them two centre-backs into the box. He is creating space for more players like Saka. The full-backs are much more experimental. Calafiori can basically go where he wants in this team right now, and it's really helping. And it's almost like the fear of Gyokeres gets to these defenders so much they think they have to defend him. Sometimes it is psychological factors. You know, we talk about Havertz. I love Havertz. I think he's brilliant. But I don't think that many defenders are particularly scared of Havertz, and they don't go to mark him. They can kind of leave him, and although he will create space for other players. He is that sort of guy that isn't that be-all and end-all in the final third. If Gyokeres gets it in a good position, you still rely on him and probably expect him to score, which makes him such a deadly threat to these defenders. And this is helping everyone. This is helping our creativity, which has been much better in the last 3 weeks. This is helping him get more shots after I had that complaint, but he has been a lot better recently. I think Trossard's a big reason for that as well. And although there is certain games where he doesn't have the biggest chances ever, like against Newcastle, he had loads of shots, but they weren't like key chances. There were some good blocks in there. He had some half chances, but nothing really concrete. But against like Olympiacos, he was utterly dominant and should have scored in that game. And that game kind of came down to the finishing. We did many good passes into the channel to him, where I do want to improve, and that's where I'm going to shift this argument. Because as much as we talk about how Gyokeres has been great at moving players around and doing all this nifty stuff, ultimately he was signed to be a better goal scorer. And I know Arteta would not be having someone in a box presence role with the amount of touches he has in the box, and that's where he is the whole time, not really score goals. Ultimately, that is his job at the end of the day. Now, we've given him the benefit of the doubt multiple times, and I think that is still fair enough, and we are winning at the end of the day. But in games like Olympiacos, which you just mentioned, he just has to score. There's a few of these chances where one-on-one, he gets the space in the box which he wants, and he doesn't take it. And admittedly, I think against Olympiacos and Bilbao, the 2 Champo games he has played, he has looked broadly quite good, because I think he is quite dominant against these sort of less physical side. We've seen him become this natural goal scorer player that only really had touches inside the box, to being a player that can take the ball everywhere, but it does just sit as a sort of ghosting player to try and allow other people in the team to get into other positions. And at the end of the day, his role is to be a striker. His job is to score, and hopefully he will get his shooting boots back. I think giving him penalties probably should be the long-term goal. I'm not a massive fan of Saka taking it. I get he's the captain, I get it's his team, but you know, I think Gyokeres might need that confidence in front of goal, because everything else Gyokeres is doing great. And I think as soon as he gets a couple more goals, which I think can actually come in any game now, at the start of the season it did seem it was like just going to come against them smaller teams, but I think I'm starting to see a bigger improvement. And I wouldn't say be exactly really happy with his performances so far. I'd say be mildly impressed, but still want more. But I do think there's some real big potential here, and I think when Havertz comes back as well, not having to play Gyokeres every game will be really good for him and the team. So I'm really excited to see that. I think he will improve more. But let me know what you guys think about Viktor Gyokeres in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.